So for myself, I had suffering in my life and I was trying to find a way to end it. So I came to Zen Buddhism not because I knew about Mahayana philosophy, but because I wanted to learn to meditate. And they were the ones who were offering meditation courses. So at the time I was looking, Theravada temples, Theravada monasteries didn't offer meditation teachings really. So this Zen temple was unique in that it had an outreach to people who were English speaking. It was focused on outreach to English speaking people, and it was quite focused on meditation. And it was also in the city. So I came to it for all of those reasons. And eventually, the more that I started to learn about Mahayana Buddhist doctrine, the more that I realized that I just couldn't agree with it. And I didn't like the way that the new sutta, they construct these new sutras and they attribute them to the Buddha. And I didn't like what I was seeing going on in those sutras. They kind of downplay it, almost make fun of some of the Buddha's chief disciples in these sutras, and they elevate the role of a layperson. So it has this kind of like some of them have a pandering quality to them that I didn't like, that I felt there was a kind of this attempt to win over lay people, which there would have been at the time when Mahayana was arising and Theravada was the main form of Buddhism. There would have been an attempt to win converts over to this new form of Buddhism. So in any event, all these things started to add up, but probably the time that I really realized I wasn't a Mahayanist was we were having this discussion one time after one of these meditation sessions with the teacher. And in the discussion, we got to talking about the goal of Buddhism. And I mentioned the goal of Buddhism is Nibbana, like we're trying to end suffering. And then the teacher said, well, there is actually this ideal of the bodhisattva who puts off their suffering forever and doesn't attain Nibbana. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You're saying that my goal is not to attain Nibbana? It's like, well, there you go. I mean, goal achieved, you know, I haven't achieved it now. So, I mean, and I didn't feel like the explanations that I was getting for actually the goal of our practice were realistic. So you get explanations. You got these very different explanations. Sometimes you get an explanation like, well, the goal is that you delay your enlightenment till everybody achieves enlightenment at the same time. Or then you had other teachings like the goal is that, you know, you delay your enlightenment until you fulfill a vow, maybe like until all the hells are empty. So just these like really intense vows. And then sometimes they would talk about saving all beings and delaying your enlightenment to saving all beings as a metaphor. And they'd say, save yourself first. And so you get these teachings in which you couldn't even pin down the goal of what you were striving for. So I found that really, I don't know how to use the word disconcerting, but I found it really off-putting. It's like, you know, I felt like if you're going to be working towards something, you should have a goal. And the goal that the Buddha laid out is clear. So these other goals, I don't really believe that they're accurate. And so I knew that I was not a Mahayanist, if that was the defining characteristic of it. So just over time, that built up. And then I eventually decided to leave. So that was how it worked.
So every Sunday, I go to this Chan meditation place, Dharma Drum Mountain. It's founded by Venerable Shane Yang. And I'll be honest, they make amazing vegetarian Chinese food, so that was like the real reason I go. But before each meal offering, though, I mean, before they make us recite, I vow to deliver all innumerable sentient beings to liberation, right? And as I'm reading that, it's like I find myself, I vowed that, but then I was like, I can't really actually with true faith vow that, because the thing is that I know what suffering is, and I'm there and I deal with suffering, and I don't think I want to fix the suffering of every individual, because like, you know, that it just seems like a goal that I just don't want to take on, right? It's a vow that I don't want to take on, you know. I mean, it's noble, right? But I don't think it's realistic, because if that was even possible, then during even Buddha's time itself, all beings would have just been delivered by that time too, you know? I mean, I don't know. It's just something that, I guess what I wanted to ask you is that you said you were suffering, right? What was your suffering? That
thing about
like one of the things that really resonates with me is the Heart Sutra, right? But that's really not part of the Theravada school, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's Mahayana.
Okay, so does the Theravada reject that fully, or how does or do they not even like consider it, or?
The Heart Sutra, well, it came after. So the Theravada school of Buddhism, we look to the suttas that the Buddha gave,
Okay.
and we don't look to post-canonical material and give it the same authority as the suttas, the actual teachings coming from the Buddha. So it's not to say that like the Heart Sutra doesn't have anything that's useful in it or anything that might point to some profound insights, but it's not part of the canon. It's not part of the teachings that the Buddha gave. So the Theravada Buddhists don't regard it as an authority. So that'd be the difference.
But the same thing could be true about Theravada Buddhists, right? So there's also early Buddhism, correct? And they said that even Theravada schools take certain things that aren't canon to what the Buddha. So how does one differentiate what was really taught by the Buddha and what really wasn't?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, especially in the West, people are skeptical. And there's a tradition in the West of actually criticizing religious texts and believing that, a lot of what goes on in religious texts is fake. And that comes from a critical theory that they use to kind of deconstruct the Bible. And that same momentum gets applied to Buddhism. So in terms of like how you tell what's real or what's fake in the Sutta Pitaka, among like Theravada monks, or at least Western ones, there's a kind of a consensus. It's not by any means like a really cohesive consensus. There's kind of a consensus that the four main Nikayas have teachings that are directly from the Buddha. And some of the ways you can tell that is like unity of voice, like for example, if I were to write something down, like write an essay, and I were to send it to you, and then I were to write an essay on a different topic, right? Then you would be able to kind of tell that this voice sounds like mine, right? Or say you listen to 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 Ajahn Sona talks, and then you get somebody to transcribe an Ajahn Sona talk and you read it, you might still get the same flavor, like this is Ajahn Sona speaking. So there's a kind of unity of voice across these 4 Nikayas. And then unity of doctrine is the more important thing. Like there's nothing in the 4 Nikayas, well, I shouldn't say, there's nothing in the main parts of these Nikayas that would contradict anything that the Buddha's taught. So you don't have like one teaching that goes against the other one. So there are portions of the Nikayas, especially the Digha Nikaya, where some monks get suspicious because they have these really, really long suttas that get really fantastic, like super magical, and they don't really have much in them about the ending of suffering. And so there's a suspicion that some suttas were added to the Digha Nikaya basically as storytelling devices for festival times. And then you have one Nikaya that's called the Khuddaka Nikaya. Nikaya is a collection. These are kind of collections of the Buddhist teachings. And that Khuddaka means like small or minor. And it used to be the shortest one, but now it's the largest. And so you can tell that there's some works in there that are just humongous. They go on and on and on and on and on, and they don't sound like the Buddha. And some of them are just basically encouraging people to give donations to monasteries and give donations to monks. So a lot of Western monks get suspicious of those. But I mean, I should jump in there and say that, you brought up an important point, because what actually tends to happen with people who claim to be early Buddhists, not all the time, but there is a tendency, is that they come up with like a designer form of Theravada Buddhism. So they come up with doctrines that actually are pretty heterodox, like they're kind of unusual, but they claim that they've kind of found almost like the real meaning of the suttas. And there's sometimes large portions of the suttas that they ignore, large portions of the Vinaya that they ignore in that case. So, I mean, you have brought up an important point among like mainstream Theravada monks. There is a kind of like a kind of amorphous consensus on what the word of the Buddha is. But then the people who claim to be like, we're early Buddhists, usually that claim goes together with an idea that they found what's really true in the suttas. And sometimes that can be quite different from what you might say like the majority of mainstream Theravada monks believe are the words of the Buddha.
And